we are go for liftoff. Everybody, Michael Bashkin is going to give us a demo on part of his finishing process, which is what this is. Where are we at in the process now?
This is the rub out.
Cool. And can you? That's the terminology that I came up with working in Guitar Factory. And what is it that differentiates that just very quickly from like other sanding that you would do?
Well, I just think of it as the final stage. Like I'm taking, this is bringing it up to the highest gloss where
Yeah.
I'm not going to be doing any further sanding.
Cool.
So,
All right.
yeah. So this, at no other point in the finishing process does it get brought up to this gloss until the end.
Cool. All right. Well, let her rip.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. The last time I did a finish demo, we were doing pore filling on a guitar, and I'll just grab that guitar now. So this is the body that we were pore filling. It was the Brazilian rosewood, and this guitar went through the whole finishing process and was rubbed out. I'm going to be demonstrating how I got to this point on a different body. So, and then this one's almost ready for strings here. So I've skipped quite a bit to get to the stage that I just showed you. But if anybody has any questions or need me to back up, just holler at any time. So I'll grab the victim here. All right, so this is the body that we're going to be working on today. And this is actually not right out of the gun. This is sanded to 1200 grit. And this is what it looks like right out of the gun. And you can kind of see the orange peel on the surface. And the goal is to really minimize and get as little orange peel as possible. But just the reality of any kind of spray finishing, you're not going to get something that's perfectly flat and high gloss out of the gun. So this is that final step that I'm going to be showing you today. Now, how much orange peel you get definitely depends on your spraying technique, your equipment, the type of finish you're using, etc. But for me, this amount of orange peel is acceptable and not that hard to rub out. So,
Michael, do you do anything in your last coat that is different from your subsequent coats? Do you go heavy on retarder or anything, any kind of
yeah,
special?
um, it's a good question. I usually go with a thinner finish, so I'll add more like 20 to 30% lacquer thinner, and I'll also put some retarder in there. The idea being that if you're really only just trying to fill scratches at that point, pardon me, and with the retarder in there, it slows down the drying. So the idea is that it kind of does some self-leveling, and you're much less likely to have any dry overspray. And one thing with the last coat of finish, and one of the reasons why I do like to put some retarder in there, is when I'm finishing, say, spraying the sides, you're going to get some dry overspray on the back, or if I'm spraying the back, you're going to get some dry overspray on the sides. And the dry overspray, it's not the end of the world. You're probably going to get some somewhere on the guitar, but it does make it a little bit harder to rub out initially. So I try and minimize that, and having the retarder in the paint and working quickly definitely keeps that to a minimum. There are some other approaches. I think Dan Erlewine called it flash coats, and I have the formula here, but I don't have it memorized. But it's a very thin finish with a lot of retarder in it, and I think if you can spray that, or if you do spray it, the idea is that the rub out goes quicker and easier. I don't have any hard data on this other than my feelings about it, uh, my emotional feelings about it in terms of adding retarder to finish. Um, I do want the finish to cure as quickly as possible. So putting a lot of retarder in the finish during the process, uh, I'm not sure. It may retard the curing of the finish, and it may not cure as hard as quickly. If anybody else has any experience with that, you please chime in. But in general, I try and keep the retarder just in the last couple coats and not bury it deep in the finish. That's the idea I have about it.
That seems to make sense. We got a couple questions about your products.
Uh-huh.
Your Cardinal lacquer, correct?
Yes. Yeah. This is just Cardinal, their gloss nitro,
Okay.
and I do use their thinner as well. I've tried using some other thinners that were a little cheaper, um, and they just don't work as well. So I'd
What is
recommend.
the indication that they're not working as well? Like they don't gas off as fast or
Um, they don't gas off as fast, and they just like I noticed it when I was cleaning my gun because um, I used some of the cheaper lacquer thinner. I use that to clean the guns and the parts. Um, and one time I was out of it, so I used the Cardinal thinner to clean the gun,
Mhm.
and it did a lot better job.
Yeah.
Quite a bit
Uh
quicker. So
is your retarder also Cardinal brand?
no, it is. I don't even know if they sell retarder. Um, it's just a general paint store brand, and I bought it. If you don't buy it through Stuart McDonald, sorry, Stuart McDonald, a gallon of it is actually really inexpensive. So I bought a gallon, but it's enough to probably last me like 57 lifetimes. So I don't know
Mhm.
why I bought a gallon, but I did. And it's called butyl cellulose. And then there's another retarder that you can also use that's a little bit hotter. It's called butyl acetate. And it does not slow down the evaporation quite as much, but it has more, I believe, acetone in it. So if you're trying to burn into a finish or with a repair, I think that the butyl acetate might work better, but I don't really have a lot of information on that.
I
So,
I switched from butyl cellulose to the Stumac just retarder, which I believe is the Balin's retarder, because
uh-huh.
I found the butyl cellulose to just be kind of problematic to work with. Like if I got any on my finger, like I would just and I missed it, I would leave fingerprints in guitars and stuff like because it
Hmm.
was so slow. Do you what kind of can we talk about like your ratio of what you're adding to get your final coat to lay out? Are you like putting in an eyedropper
Oh,
into a cup or do you have
yeah,
a
I'm like I'm when I cook, I don't follow a recipe, and when I
uh-huh
mix lacquer, it's usually a cap full or a splash.
uh-huh.
Um, so yes, and if you find that disappointing, then
No, that's okay, but
sorry.
just for instance, if you're mixing up
Mhm.
like I'm guessing you're using a gravity fed cup gun or are you using a pot?
Yeah, I have about a 20, I think it's about a 22 ounce, reservoir. And so in that amount, I'll try and add maybe like 10% butyl cellulose.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, not a ton. I never, not more than 20. And actually, I've got that recipe for the flow coats is right here. Um, or flash coats. So it's thin, yeah, thin lacquer, um, 2 parts lacquer, 1 part thinner, and 10% butyl cellulose. So
Cool.
that's what I have for the flash coats.
Cool. How,
And
what's
mhm.
just out of curiosity, what's the viscosity? I've never opened a can of Cardinal. What's the viscosity on that stuff like? Does it come out of come to you fairly viscous, or is it pretty low? Is it like ready to shoot out of the can, or do you have to modify it just to get it through the gun?
You don't have to modify it to get it through the gun, but it does depend on the temperature. And in my shop, I don't have great temperature control where my spray room is. So during the winter months, I will thin it out with acetone, um, 10 to 20% actually. And then in the warmer months, I'll probably won't thin it out at all. Um, and then anything in between, I'll probably add 10% thinner. So
Cool.
yeah, and the idea with not, trying not to thin it out, it's just that the spraying goes quicker because you're putting, more finish and less thinner on the guitar. So somebody had a question earlier about, I watched the Porfield video. Is there a previous video on your spraying process? The answer is no, but I'm happy
No.
to answer any questions about that.
Yeah, maybe
Um,
we'll go in the booth
okay.
next time you round that corner or something. We can talk about your
Yeah.
booth and booth stuff. That'd be a good one.
All right. Okay. So let's see.
You want me to switch
Uh,
spotlights? You ready to talk about the guitar?
mm, no, let me just do a brief introduction to some of the materials that I'm using.
Yeah.
And I'll try and keep this brief because you'll see more of it. And I don't want to spend too much time talking about part numbers and that kind of thing. But basically, you know, I, I start at 1200 grit, and um, I'm going to show you two different options today. In what I've done for years is I'll power sand 1200 grit, and I'll use these 3M finishing film discs. And this is part number 00980. They also sell this in different sizes, but I like to use the 3 inch. It is a hooked disc, and this is what it looks like. And these are really good. They tend not to load up, but they can still load up, so you need to be careful about that. Um, I like to use a disc off of the sander. It's 3 inch, so I can use the same discs by hand. And then recently, I just got this. I don't know what to call it except for like a nubbin. And this again holds a 3 inch discs, but gives you a nice control. And I definitely need to paint some eyeballs on here.
That's
But
cool looking.
what is this from? Is this from a video game or a
I,
movie, or what am I thinking of?
I don't know. I don't know.
Okay.
The Pac-Man ghost.
Yeah, it kind of does look like a
Yeah, I
Pac-Man
think
ghost.
Pac-Man. Right. Okay.
Um,
All right. There we go. So,
so I got just a quick question about your choice of going 3 inch rather than 5 inch and
yeah.
all the other inches. 5 inch is kind of like I feel like maybe the standard for a lot of guitar factories, but
Hmm.
I it's interesting. I always felt like, especially for as many cutaways as we did at Breedlove, that 3 inch might have been a better solution. I never tried it on my watch, but is that kind of your thought on 3 inch or
Yeah. Basically, it just seemed like it was for two reasons. One, it's that I felt like the 3 inch is a little bit more appropriate to the size of guitar I build and all the curves and the cutaways. I can definitely get into those a lot farther with this size sander. And the other thing is that I spray really thin. Like, I try and have on the top like 2 to 3 thousandths finish, and on the back and sides, not much more. And if I'm going to blow through anywhere on the finish, which I have, it's usually on the binding edge or the purflings. And I just feel like with the 5 inch sander, it's a little bit harder for me to keep track of, where the edge of the sander is. Whereas the 3 inch, I can really, I know exactly where I am. I can stay away from the bindings and purflings, do those by hand. And so the 3 inches has worked for me. The other thing that kind of pushed me towards a smaller sander was if you do get a spot on a disc where it corns up, you can clean it off and keep going, but it tends to kind of want to keep corning up. And so if I get some corning on a 3 inch disc, I feel better about tossing that than I do a 5 inch disc because there's probably a lot of, still good material in there. So that's why I went with the smaller sander. And then the final reason, it isn't too much of a reason, but just ergonomically, I kind of like the smaller sander. And, I feel like I can kind of finesse, especially around the edges a little bit more. So,
Can we
um,
are we going to talk about your sander a little bit? Because
yeah. So this is a qual spray, and it's an oilless sander. Um, so it's the pneumatics are a little bit different. It does have a speed control,
oh,
um, but and the other nice thing about this is, you can. I've never done it, but you can get this. I wouldn't throw it in water, but it gets very wet because I do parts of this is wet sanding. Um, so I never have to worry about any rust or getting water on the sand or anything like that. And obviously, if you'd have to do this with a pneumatic if you have an electric sander. I imagine there are issues with wet sanding and electrocution. So
there I would imagine. So that is pneumatic.
yeah, this is pneumatic, and let me.
Does it take
So
like
just to be fully transparent, it's Qual Spray Air Sander. It's the QS-4147CF.
can we talk CFMs really quick? Is that I remember like we used Dynabraids at Breedlove and I loved them. But they
Yeah.
required such a hoss of an air compressor to run. Is that in the size? Is it less CFM requirement, or do you still have to have a hoss of a compressor?
You still have to have a big compressor.
Okay.
Yeah. And I have Dynabraids, and I use those for all the wood prep and everything, kind of but the finish sanding. So yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Jeff has a this is a good message. Jeff, I would like to buy another one actually because I got this sander through Jeff and then I wanted to buy another one, but Jeff said he couldn't supply them anymore because the manufacturer were being unhelpful. But it looks like he's going to get more in. So yeah,
Can,
so I really do like these sanders. I would recommend them.
can we talk
Um,
just one more thing on the sander? Hold on a second. Kevin can
yeah,
come in here and try to.
and then as long as we're talking about CFMs and a question just came up about the compressor. I have a 5 horsepower, 80-gallon compressor.
How
Um,
many stage? Is it a two
it's
stage
it,
or?
it's a two-stage, and I think the CFM at 90 psi is like either 15 or 17. I don't know exactly what it is.
So pattern on the orbital is also pretty important. I feel like. Do you have a
Yeah.
different pattern on your woodworking ones versus the one that you're using for finish?
Actually, no. I've gone to all small orbit sanders.
Yeah.
So they're all, I think, the 332nd Sanders. And I have some other ones that are even smaller. I'll just go grab them.
Your wrench fell. Jeff is saying 332 is best for finishes. Hi, Jeff.
Hello, everyone.
How you doing?
Good. Nice weather here in Cleveland.
Uh-huh. That's almost when I think of Cleveland, I think of nice weather. So
Okay. So this is an interesting sander. This is from Dynabrade,
whoa.
and they call this, what do they call it? They may or may not call it the jitterbug, but this is again a non-oil sander, and it's got the super super fine pattern, and it's really actually nice for kind of getting into these areas.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the orbit is, but it's definitely smaller, the smallest one I have. But I got to tell you, I haven't really learned to love this sander, so it's kind of ended up in a drawer, and I
Is
don't
it
use it very much.
is there do you load sandpaper onto that like you would load a square like a palm sander, or is it
No,
just
it
stick it?
it has the Velcro, and then I modified it uh, just to fit my discs.
Okay.
So yeah. So this is another finish sander I have. This one, this is a Dynabrade inline sander
Yeah.
that I use for wood prep sometimes. And then the sander that I've tried to love, and but it I don't break it out too much, is this tank,
Look at that.
um, and it's just based on weight alone. This is the clear winner. This is the heaviest sander that I have, which
Uh-huh.
I think is part of it's why it works the way it does, just because of the heft of it. You know, it really keeps things from kind of skating around.
Yeah.
But it's a bit of a beast, and it actually has a port where you can put water or soapy water in here, so
Oh,
it'll come out on the sanding. And this one does not have a hook and loop. It's a system like that.
yeah.
So and this one, yeah, I use it occasionally, but it's kind of fallen a little bit out of favor.
Uh,
But if you see one of these cheap, you have to buy them used. They don't make them anymore. You might just grab it and see if you like it.
well, yeah,
So
even as like a artifact, it's an impressive thing.
yeah. So
That's quite an assortment of pneumatic sanders, like
yeah, well, part of it was it was all about looking for what was going to give me the best results in the least amount of time.
yeah.
And I don't really know that I've worried about the time so much anymore. Um, I'm not a production guitar builder, so um, if it takes me a little bit longer to rub out a finish, but I get good consistent results, then that's okay. But for a while, I kept thinking that spending more money on sanders was the way to go.
Well, it probably was, you know. You may you don't want to live in fear of missing out on something. I mean, that'd
That
be
is true.
terrible.
Yeah.
But
Uh,
then once you find out that you've got, what you need, then maybe quit buying sanders, I suppose.
yeah. Yeah. Um, okay. So let's see. Is that the sander they use at Steinway? I don't know.
Yes, it is.
Right. Okay.
Yep.
This National.
The National. Well, it's made under a bunch of different names.
Mhm.
Stuhr, Stuhr, was the one that I had, and actually they make a version that has two pads on it, so it
Mm.
weighs about 30 pounds. And
Hmm.
the idea behind it is that because of its weight, it levels the finish like really well without having to put any downward pressure on it. So when
Yeah.
you see a Steinway piano and it looks like brushed metal, that's how they used to do, or that's how they get it.
Uh, one more question on your pneumaticisms here. Are you worried at
Hmm.
all about vibration? Do you wear any kind of like anti-vibration gloves when you're doing this, or?
I don't. Partially because I feel like the Dynabrade sanders, and especially this sander, the vibration is super low.
It's low. Okay.
Yeah, I never, after I use them, I I never have that feeling of like that I'm still sanding in my wrist. So
Cool.
yeah, but I know that what you're talking about, and I have experienced that with some electric sanders that I do wear a glove. So
Cool.
okay, well, all right, slight sidetrack there. Then and now to get into the manual world, I have a whole series of calls. These are the Durablocks that you can get at most automotive stores or supply houses. I just got to close this door here. Keep the sound down.
That sports radio.
My neighbors, my neighbors blasting podcasts. So, and they come in all shapes. This is great for getting in the waist and up on the shoulders of the neck. And then I'm kind of modify them a lot. These are much softer, and I use these especially for sanding around the heel of the neck. And this one you can kind of see how I've tapered, so I can get in again to the heel of the neck, which on my guitars is pretty tight. So lots of sanding pads. I do have different densities. These ones from Kovacs are really hard, but I like to use these if I have a little spot that I feel like I need to level. All right, and then in terms of the real question here is more about sandpaper, and I'm going to show you two different approaches today. I think they both work. I'm not entirely sure which one I prefer yet, because this newer method that is dry with this Assilex paper is a little bit new to me. So, but generally speaking, my first method is I start with the 1200 3M discs. Then I go to a 1500, and this is wet. And this is a little bit of what I think is proving to be a critical step, in that this is a non-hook and loop wet dry paper, and I use this on hard call. And so I kind of consider the first stage with the 1200 to be, I'm just getting the orange peel off. Generally, yes, this is nitrocellulose lacquer. So thank you for asking.
Just to back up really quick, the hook and loop 1200. Which specific 3M product is that?
Okay.
Is that
So I think this is equivalent to the 260L paper, but the part number is right
okay.
there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you just pop one of those discs out and show the backing on it really quick?
Sure.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Okay.
The backing's really hard to see. This is the back.
Okay. So it's not that purple stuff. Okay.
Yeah. So I do have some of the purple stuff, and I think you're talking about this.
Okay.
That's what you mean by purple stuff.
No.
No?
I don't know. 3M changes their. Oh,
Okay.
No. 3M changes their stuff. I actually I've never seen that stuff before. It looks exotic.
Okay. So let's see, where was I? Okay, so this is step one. Then by hand, I'll do this step two, and I'm going to show you. And when I actually do this, I'll talk a little bit more about why I think this might be a critical step. And then from there, I go to these Trizac papers. Or they're not really papers, sorry, they're bits of foam. And I got the 3000 and the 5000. So, and the part numbers are right on the bottom there.
Okay.
But you can get these through automotive stores or, online, Amazon. But I do really like this Trizac stuff. So, Okay, and then a few more esoteric papers is I do have these toll cut papers, which are like the Assilex and the buflex, but these are sticky back. So if you need to level something really flat, then this on one of these Kovacs hard blocks is a good way to go. Okay, so let's just say we'll do the bass side of the guitar with my old method, and then we'll try the newer method on the treble side of the guitar. So, Ian, I think you can switch to the this other camera with the
Right.
workbench.
What kind of wood are we looking at there, Michael?
Oh, anybody want to guess?
Uh,
There's no prize, but
Cocobolo?
No.
no.
Cataloche?
Yes, very good. Cataloche, also known as Mexican Royal Ebony. If you want to charge more for it, you'd call
Uh-huh.
it that. So, okay, I do have this is a wet rub out, and I use water and Downy soap, and it's just this, liquid stuff. Woolite. Did I say Downy? Sorry. I bought that bottle about 15 years ago. And I don't measure. I basically just put in a Dawn is better. All right. Thanks, Jeff. Trying to undercut me here. Okay, Dawn, you have it from the master. So I'll have to give that a try. So no, you don't want to overload it. You don't want too much soap, but the soap helps break down the surface tension of the water and prevents any kind of like surface tension or almost like suction between your sandpaper and the finish, and keeps things moving. So, all right. So a good practice is, can I ask what grit the guitar has already? Yes, 1200. So I'm going to be repeating this step, and I apologize for not having this just straight out of the gun. But as I showed you earlier, this used to just look like this. So, all right. So you want to make sure that your work area is clean, that you haven't just been doing a bunch of sanding. There's not any airborne dust that can settle on the guitar and get caught between your sander and the finish and give you little pigtails. I do like to wipe down the guitar, as you just saw, with a little water. Yes, no, definitely no stars of death in terms of little fret nibs. But you want a clean surface, if that's not obvious. All right. And then,
Did you get the Trevor Healy question?
no, I didn't. What was the question?
Yeah, he was wondering if you would take the orbital to the headstock, or you like hand sanding headstock all the way out.
Oh, it's a good question, and I hand sand it until I get to the Trizac papers, and then I use the orbital. But I've had good results with both, and I've had good results using the Trizac papers just by hand. It's just takes a little bit longer. So, okay. Are you getting enough of this bench?
Yeah, I almost feel like I could do both, and it might be instructive. Should I try
Okay.
doing split screen?
Yeah, I'm just going to move my laptop away from the.
Okay, well then we won't use that one then.
That might be good to do both. No? All right.
Oh yeah, we could do both. Hold on. We'll go wide. Oh, I didn't ask you how firm that pad is. Do you have a firmness of pad preference on your orbital?
Yeah, I like about the medium density pads, especially in this stage. A soft pad would be the wrong thing to do. You could even go with a little bit of a harder pad, but a medium density I think is good for flattening finish.
You'd
And
be
again,
worried
this
about.
stage, Mhm.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
This stage, I'm actually really just focused on getting the orange peel out. It's really the next stage that I sort of think about the true flattening of the finish.
Okay.
All right. So I'm going to slow this down a little bit. Okay, a couple quick points is that just kind of out of habit. If you noticed, I went this direction first and then I went this direction second. It's just something I do when I'm sanding wood, so I kind of got in the habit of also doing it in sanding finish. And it just kind of helps me keep track so I'm not sanding too much in any one area. And if you notice, I wasn't coming onto the guitar from the edge. I was always approaching the edge from on the guitar. I'm just going to unplug this because it's leaking a little bit. Because I mentioned earlier about burning through, and it's almost always on the binding and purflings. And if you're coming onto an edge, the sander, might be tilted a little bit. Sorry about the angle here. And you might get a lot of sanding right on the corner. So when I'm getting towards the edge of the guitar, most of the sander is on the guitar to hold it level. And when if I hadn't already flattened this with 1200, I do about that amount of sanding, and then I rotate the guitar in the light and see, all right, well, I still have a little orange peel over here. So then I'll just kind of do selective sanding. But as I mentioned earlier, my finishes are pretty thin, so it's not like I can just kind of keep mindlessly hogging away at them and think that I'm not going to burn through. So this is the 1200, and then something that's been on my mind lately about, well, I should say for the last 20 years with rubbing out finishes is that this is a medium density pad, but this there is the nap of the hook and loop, and I can press down on this. It deflects fairly easily, and so this may take out the orange peel and definitely make the finish flatter, but it also may kind of create this sort of surface over the whole back. And so I feel like the next step really gives me a flat surface. This was just to remove the orange peel, but now if I'm going for that super high gloss, I need a flat finish. And the only way, or I think an effective way to do that is you need a hard block, and you need a sandpaper that's not hook and loop without any nap on it. So we'll do that now.
Michael, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, of course.
Do you see any temperature raise on the finish and whatever when you're sanding pneumatically like that? Gets it getting hot?
Oh, no, not with the water. I've never noticed any feelings of that the finish was heating up at all. I've now I am on this side of the guitar. We're going to do a dry rub out, and but I do that by hand, so I just don't think it's quick enough to raise the temperature of the finish, which would be a problem because the lacquer will move and it can start to shrink back a little bit. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
And then,
Michael,
yeah,
can I ask one question? Are you like looking at your guitar and kind of like, do you have a sense of how thick your finish is, and are you like maybe you have areas that you're suspicious of or anything like that you're staying off of, or are you just basically trusting your process at this point?
yeah, it's a great question, and it's kind of both. When I spray the guitar, I'm not spraying it necessarily evenly. Like I know areas that have been problematic for me in the past with burning through, so I'll lay quite a bit more finish on those areas. So, like in probably, I'd say on the back, if I have 9 coats of lacquer, um, I'll double coat the edges. So I'll have my gun at a 45, and I'll be spraying this surface right around here, and I'll do that both on the top and the back. Um, Edges of the headstock. So areas like in here, these points, I tend to spray heavier. Um, Edge of the fingerboard. So it's kind of been this a little bit of an iterative process where, if I sand through in an area a couple times on successive guitars, then I'm definitely going to be changing my spray technique so that it doesn't happen.
Well,
So
You give
Um,
the edges a double coat for every of the 9 coats,
uh,
or just a few times.
yeah, no, I usually do it because I tend to spray pretty thin. Like I'm not, I don't put a lot on each coat. So yeah, I'll double coat. I'd say probably most coats, except for the last 3 coats, which are either the flash, a thinner mixture with the retarder in there. I won't double coat at that point. So, and another thing to consider is that even though each coat is really pretty light, um, I I do sanding, sessions with 400 and 600 every 3 or 4 coats. So a lot of what I'm putting on is also getting knocked back as well. And then acoustically speaking, I really don't, it doesn't bother me if the finish is thicker around the edges, the binding, um, or even the sides, or really even the neck. I'm concerned about what it is on the back and then the top of the guitar. And then another way that I'll kind of monitor my finish thickness is, when I peel this tape, I'll be able to measure the finish thickness on top of the tape pretty accurately, and that's how I know that my finishes are, somewhere in that 2-3 thousandths range on the top, which I do intentionally put less finish on the top than I do the back. So yeah, good question. All right, so this is that 3M wet dry paper. Okay, we have no nap, and I'm putting this on a hard block. And the hard block, I should mention, the edges I slightly roll off, so I don't have a sharp 90-degree edge here. And I'll do this. You can go at a slight angle. Some people, go completely cross grain, and then the next grit, they'll go the opposite direction. And that is a good way to monitor your scratches. But I usually just go slightly askew. Now this is a went from 1200 to 1500, and it's not a big jump. All the orange peel is already off the guitar. And so at this point, I'm trying to take that 1200 surface and just make it more, I don't know if this is the correct term, but optically flat. So I don't just want, a little flat patch here and another little patch that's flat here, but maybe it's at a slightly different angle or it's going to reflect the light a little different. I'm trying to get the surface to be all the same. And a little bit of white that you can see coming up here is a little bit of finish that's getting abraded, but I'm not taking off a lot. And I'm using a little bit of pressure here because, again, I think of this as like, this is where I'm actually flattening the finish into the kind of surface that I want. And again, I'm not really coming on to the guitar this way. If I want to get an edge, most of the pad will be on the guitar, and I can sand it this way, not coming on it this way. And one of the downsides of wet sanding is it's really hard to see. It's hard to see what your progress is until you actually, wipe the guitar off. The surface is dry, and then, you look at it in the light, and what you're seeing here, what I'm doing on the bench, is not actually how I would look at it. I'd actually hold it up in a very, bright light. I have these 20 or 25 watt LEDs, and I'll get a very low angle, and that really allows me to see the scratch pattern that I'm in or that I'm putting on the guitar. And that's I'd say that's absolutely essential to doing this. You really need to be able to follow your progress, and having a strong low angle light that's fairly harsh is a really good way to see scratch patterns in a finish. So with this grit paper, it's just the 1500. I'm not going to overdo it, but in terms of sanding through the finish, but I also don't want to do really any more sanding than necessary. So based on what I just saw from holding the guitar in a low angle of light, it looked to me like we had now gotten the 1200 scratches out, and we had established a flatter 1500 scratch pattern. And so this second round that I just did was just kind of for good measure. Two things I want to point out. One is that this finish has been curing for about 4 weeks, and that's just my experience with Cardinal Nitro. They certainly give a much shorter cure time, I think of about 10 days. And the finish is hard enough after 10 days where you could rub it out to a high gloss. The problem is that if the finish isn't done doing most of its curing through evaporation, you'll have a beautiful high gloss surface, and then 2 or 3 weeks later, it won't look like a beautiful high gloss surface anymore. It'll just continue to shrink back, and you'll just have to do the whole process over again. So my experience with lacquer is, the longer you can wait, the better. And
Michael, are you trying to avoid a lot of post cure? Like, do you like to see some ribbing in the spruce tops like after time, or are you trying to avoid that altogether?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't actually have strong feelings about that. I don't mind seeing some of the texture of the wood in the finish, especially on the top. And if I don't see any texture, it doesn't bother me either. Like, oh, there's a problem because I'm not seeing any, little bits of grain in the finish itself. So yeah, whichever way it comes out, that's the way I tell myself I intended it to be. So,
That's great. And that it's for tone.
and it's for tone, right? So, but I am using a 2-part polyurethane sealer, and I find that with that sealer, I do end up getting ultimately a flatter surface, especially on the top, than if I was using a vinyl sealer or shellac.
I was gonna say with 2 or 3 thousandths of finish, not having some post cure, you've got to be using something pretty solid underneath that, because that's not a lot of barrier.
Yeah.
Hey, Michael, can I ask a question
Yes.
real quick?
Sure.
At like, are you waiting the full 4 weeks before you touch it with a sandpaper, or are you opening it up and then letting it sit for another week? Or
That's a good question too.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I do both. Partially it's out of maybe just laziness. Um, but I understand the idea of, you put your final coat on, let it hang for a couple days or a week, and then sand it out to 1200. And the idea is that breaks the surface of the finish. You're putting a lot of and you're increasing the surface area of the finish. So it's going to evaporate and cure faster, which totally makes sense. And then the other idea is that you just spray it, and if you can let it hang for 4 or 5 weeks, which I usually do, then the finish is going to be fine. And I can't say I've noticed a difference either way. So, but if I was, for some reason, like really pressed on time on a guitar, um, which is usually actually almost always the case, but then I think it's a good idea to open up the finish after you spray the last coat, just to increase the surface area. And I think all the solvents will get out faster. So it's a good point.
On the same question, like how long are you waiting to sand out in between sprays, and how long do you give it in between spray days? Are you on a 3 shoot kind of schedule, or?
No, I tend to go a little bit faster. Like if I spray on a Friday, I'll be coming in Monday morning, sanding, and getting back in the booth Monday afternoon.
Okay.
But sometimes I find, or a lot of times, I'll just wait one day.
Okay.
And I feel that the total cure time at the end is more important than the cure time between sessions. And then also, depending on the day, if I'm spraying 4 coats in a day, if I can wait, an hour or an hour and 20 minutes between coats, then I think that's worthwhile doing. Even though I think Cardinal says you can spray after, I don't know what it is, 30 or 40 minutes. But to
Wow.
me, that's where when you spray a coat, that's when the solvents are the hottest and they're the most open to the atmosphere. So the longer I can wait between coats, that just instinctively, that's the direction I've headed. Could be wrong. So
are you sanding at 1200 in between coats as well?
no, absolutely not. That's a totally different sanding regime. Different papers, different grits. It's much rougher. So I'll spray 3 coats, and then I'll sand with either 320 or 400 grit, dry, not wet. Because if you for some reason if you go through then and you get any water on the bare wood, that's a big problem. And I'll do some power sanding, with this sander, and then but quite a bit of it's by hand. just because the finish is so thin, I'm worried about going through. Oh, just to give you a more complete answer to that question. So 3 coats, 400, 3 coats, wait a day or two, 400 grit, 3 or 4 more coats, wait a day or 3 days, and then 600 grit. And then maybe I'll do 800 on the top, and then I'll do the final, 3 flash coats. And then at that point, you can wait 4 weeks or 5 weeks, or wait a week, open up the finish with some 1200 and go from there. So I'm having trouble seeing the questions just because I'm.
Oh, I can call them out. Jeff had an observation that your between coat spray time depends entirely on your environment and the type of thinner, which is good. I've never shot any production nitro. Would you be concerned that if you let it go out, like let it sit for a week, that maybe you'd have adhesion issues? I know lacquer melts into lacquer, but like if it's gotten hard enough, it seems like it might be an issue if you let it sit for too long. I don't know.
Yeah, I would. First of all, I would not spray if for some reason, say I went out of town or something and I couldn't spray for a week. I would definitely give it a fresh sanding.
Yeah.
So I would sand it again, say at 600, and I would always try and spray within 24 hours of whenever I sanded it. And then if I was gone a week, I probably would add, a little extra splash of retarder
Yeah.
in the finish just to give it a little bit more burn in.
Cool. We got another question. What role do the flash coats you mentioned have in your process, and does that include retarder? So your flash coats are at the very end, correct?
Yeah, the flash coats are at the end, and the role that they play is that it gives me a higher gloss. It leaves a higher gloss surface than my previous coats, so it saves a little bit of time on the rub out, and it also, and the flash coats do have retarder on it. I should say that I don't view the flash coats as a necessity.
Mm-hmm.
I think you'd be fine without it. You could just spray 2 full strength coats or 3 thin down coats, and you'll still be fine. So I wouldn't get too hung up on the flash coat thing.
Can I just maybe I can synopsis this just a little bit different? Like what Michael was saying earlier was that you don't want to put a lot of retarder in the middle of your process because it can trap in there. But the retarder, it does a couple things. One, it helps it bite, but it also helps it flow out. And so if you have like a solvent rich mixture with like a lot of retarder in it, gravity will actually you don't have to have like the greatest atomization in the world in order to get a very smooth finish, because the gravity will actually allow that lacquer to lay out. And so the flash coat at the very end is basically he's sanded it out and he's putting it on there, and he's letting that slowness of that solvent let that to lay out. Jeff Jewett just came charging in. He says he would discourage retarder in the final coats if possible. And so we have our first internet dust up here. You want to challenge Jeff to a duel or anything, Michael? Or
no, not really. Yeah, I think that in some ways the retarder it can be counterproductive.
Yeah.
But I have to say that at least the amount that I'm using, the 10%, I haven't noticed a difference in finish hardness or any different qualities in the rub out. But there could be. I could see a danger in too much retarder, for sure.
There's a danger in it, curing everything too, but there's also, your lacquer is staying wet longer. So it just becomes a magnet for anything that's maybe floating around in your booth that you weren't able to
Mhm.
get out before you start too. So there's a lot of what Jeff is saying is there's some double-edged swords in there, and I agree with that. So
Yeah.
anyhow,
Okay, so it's a good practice before you go on to the next grit to wipe the guitar down. The idea being that if you have any little sandpaper particles that have come off on the guitar and are still sitting on the finish, you don't want to then start your next grit with a little particle of 1500 in here that's then going to get moved around on the guitar. So, okay. And for me, I really like these Scott shop towels. I go through a lot of those in this process. All right, so I've done the 1500, and now in what I've been doing is actually going right up to the 3000. I think that there's some reason to do one more intermediate grit if I had like a 2000 or a 2500, just to work down the 1500 a little bit. But most of the time, if I spend a little bit extra time with this 3000 Trizac, it seems to cut down the 1500 fine. But if you try this method and you find like the 1500 isn't quite getting taken out, then try one more finer paper before going to the this Trizac. Oops. Okay. So take a look at it. Let's see how these scratch patterns look in some very bright, low angle light. And as soon as while it's drying off, again, I just wanted to point out that, you know, this surface, this is almost like a thin sponge. It's doing a different thing than sanding with that previous grit on this harder block. This harder block, I'm thinking of leveling the finish. This type of backer, I'm thinking of just refining the surface. I'm really not doing any leveling. And it's important to understand the difference and know when you should be doing each. So, okay. All right, that looks pretty good. And I don't know if you can see it in the camera there, but you know, you can see I've got a more refined surface here than when we go over here with the 1200. It's scattering the light more. So, all right. Just from experience, I'm going to do one more pass of the 3000, then we'll go into the 5000, and then we're pretty much done with this side.
It's a very satisfying pattern on there, Michael.
Oh, thank you, Ian. If there's anyone who would appreciate it, I think it would be you. All right. So again, look in the light. That's the only way you're really going to be following your progress. And now I'm going to start. I can go to the 5,000. And I don't know if you get to see this, but I buy these in these rectangular sheets, and then I just cut a 3-inch disc out of it. So if I was using a different type of sander, or if I was doing this by hand on a rectangular pad, then obviously I wouldn't be cutting these up. My experience with the Trizac is that it doesn't last that long. So like this disc, I would probably just use for the back, and then probably just cut a new disc for the top. And then for the sides, I'd use a disc that I had used on the back or the top. Okay.
Any idea what your total cost for abrasives for a guitar is?
No, it's a good question, and I should know, but I don't. I know that these cost about $8 a piece, and I can get 3 sanding discs, so it's not cheap.
Michael, I think you could probably make an Eno and Fripp record with that. That's amazing. You got some really nice harmonics happening in there.
Thanks.
The
I would point out that I'm really just kind of floating this over the surface. There's nothing bearing down. It's just the weight of the sander, and my hand is just guiding the sander across. There's really no chatter or vibration. Again, these grits are just for refining the surface. I'm not trying to level anything at this point. Everything should be level.
Michael, I'm assuming you must have tried every which way. Have you tried less sanding, more buffing, and like everything in between, and then settled on this?
Not exactly. I've tried a lot of different methods, but I generally have tried to do as little buffing as possible.
Okay.
Which is why I go up to such a high grit. Some people, you could go from say 1200 right to the buffer, and you'll spend a lot of time buffing. For me personally, like I I see buffing as like a very high risk activity.
Uh-huh.
I have a tremendous amount of time and money, um, and sweat and tears and blood in the guitar to this point. And things can happen quickly and badly on a buffer.
Uh-huh.
So I would rather spend the time sanding, bringing it up to 5,000, and then I can be on the buffer, on and off really quickly, because it's really pretty close at this point. And I'm going to show that to you now. I don't know that I have I certainly haven't tried every buffer. I've tried different wheels, different compounds, and I guess I'm just not a buffer guy. Maybe I would just put the blame on myself to say maybe I just don't have the technique to go from 1200 to high gloss. But the other annoying thing is I find we're going to do a little hand rub out now, and then I find I'll have a really nice surface with the hand rub out. But then if I take that and I put that on the buffer, I feel like the buffer imparts its own texture to the surface. And to go back to what Joel was saying earlier, there's certainly more friction involved, so it can heat up the finish and it can start to move it around. So in some ways, if you're not really careful with the buffing, you can undo what we've just done. And that's another reason why I'm sort of, I go light on the buffing.
Cool.
I feel like that was a bit of a diatribe. So.
That was a good one, though.
All right. Okay, so you can see the difference between, the reflection we're getting now versus when it comes over to 1200. No big surprise or whoop-de-doo there. But what I do like about this technique is that if you want, you don't have to go to the buffer at all. It's a fine enough a surface where I'll take this 3M Perfected polish. Okay, it's 06094 is the part number. I'll take one of my Scott's towels, I'll wrap it around a block, and I'll put a little compound on here, and with really not a ton of rubbing, some elbow grease.
Did you say that was Perfected?
Yes, Perfected.
Okay. Do you also have Finesse It? I can't remember which one is which.
The two that I use, I find this. Let me show you.
Oh, you got the Novo. Okay.
Yeah,
Novus.
this Perfected I use first, and then I'll follow it up with the Novus. So
Cool. It makes me really happy to see you hard blocking with rubbing compound. I think that's a really overlooked technique.
yeah, me too.
A lot of people just like kind of freehand it with the cloth. You ever mess around with any exotic paper towels like the wipe alls or anything like that?
No, I haven't. Is there something I should give a try?
Well, the wipe alls, I went to go replace them once because that's what we used at Breedlove, and then I realized that wipe all makes about like 500 different products that all look exactly like a white paper towel.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a step up from the blue shop towels in terms of softness, and it may be something where if you went from blue shop towel to that, you may get a finer hand rubbed experience. I don't know that if it's appreciable or anything like that or worth it, and they're actually quite expensive. That's
Okay.
looking pretty nice.
Yeah, so it's not perfect, but I spent maybe, I don't know, a minute or two.
Yeah.
But if I took my time to say spend 5 minutes or 10 minutes, then I don't really think I would really even need to go to the buffer on this. There's a little bit of a, like it's like a little bit of a greasy residue from the Perfected, and then I would follow it up with some of the Novus.
Michael, have you ever done kind of halfway between the buffer and what you're doing now with a random orbital polisher, like a foam pad or something, with the Perfected?
Yeah, I've tried that, and I've got some little. I'll show you. I've got these little interface pads.
Yeah, that's what I got.
Yeah, and I can't pinpoint why, but it seemed like it was. It seemed like I was taking a step backwards.
Well,
But-
one thing I notice is all of your buffing motion is with the grain, correct? At that point, like
Yes, I am. I am going in line. You could do little circles, but I feel like no matter how fine I polish, there's still a level of scratch pattern in the
Yeah.
surface. This isn't quite the Hubble Space Telescope mirror,
uh,
and that if there is going to be a scratch pattern, it should either be random or in line
or
with the grain.
with, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if I would, my instinct, if I was buffing with a buffing wheel, would be my last pass would definitely be with inline.
Yeah.
But I was just wondering if like throwing that pad on the random orbital must give you some cross grain polishing as well.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of what I had experienced with it. So,
Yeah, every time I've used the Perfected, which is what you're using, and the pads that they recommend for each grit, I get, large 3-inch size swirls or scratches. Very slight, but I just couldn't get around it.
yeah.
Jeff Jewett, are you still there? Nice.
I think I pissed him off enough. He's gone.
Oh snap!
But yeah, you can. This is pretty much high gloss. I mean, it's not perfect. I would definitely do more work on it before sending the guitar out. But that's a process that I've used for years, and it has worked for me. And
Back.
I can still take this and do a light buff. As Ian was saying, I probably wouldn't. I would only buff in the direction of the grain at this point. I wouldn't see a reason to do, 3 passes at an angle, 3 passes at the opposite angle, and then straight. So
How heavy have you experimented with the hand rubbing compounds? Have you gone over into the Menzernas at all, or it's been some time since I've used 3M because I kind of got hooked on Menzerna. I was just wondering if you have a comparison contrast.
yeah, it's a good question, and the answer is no. I've been sort of a 3M lackey for decades, but I if there's something you think works better, I'd love to know about it.
Well, it's that I was going to ask Jeff about the finesse it in relationship to the Perfected. I can't remember which one is which, or if 3M even still makes it. Jeff, do you remember finesse it, the 3M?
Yeah, I remember finesse it. Hang on, I got leave.
Are you at a high school football game? It sounds like you're.
No, I had my iPhone on out in the shop.
Okay.
The Perfected was the stuff that we always used to buy, for like in quart jars. And, I don't know when the name changed, but the ones that they make now are really nice because they're labeled, I think, 1, 2, and 3. So they're very easily color coded. Let me see if I've got some bottles here. I like the 3M compounds. I don't like the Menzerna because I can't figure out their numbering system is like a big head scratcher.
Yeah, it is.
Guitar makers, don't need extra confusion as far as I'm concerned. And, if you label something like, well, you start with the number 7 and then you go to the number 25 and then you go to the number 1, like McGuire's does that. That's like really stupid. So the 3M stuff is 1, 2, 3, and it's really good. So I would recommend that. I'm gonna go grab the bottle. Yeah,
This is the
yeah, that's
number
the stuff.
2.
That's the stuff. And you can get it in smaller, like pint size or half pint bottles if you're just doing this occasionally. Like a lot of 3M stuff, it's not the least expensive stuff in the store, but it's good quality stuff.
Jeff, do you know what the third M is for?
What the what?
I'm just kidding.
Oh,
What the third M is for?
Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing.
Was that right?
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing.
that's great.
All right. So this is one way of rubbing out finish, and I'm going to show you a second method on this side of the guitar, and then I'll give you a little qualitative comparison. So this this newer method is totally dry, and it uses these super Assilex papers, and I got 1200, 1500, 2000, 25, and 3000. I got these while I was in Japan last spring because you can get them quite a bit cheaper over there. But if you want to get them in the States, I think they're available from Eagle Abrasives is where you would get them.
Is that the stuff that Stumac sells, like in the little kit that's super expensive? Or is it a different? No, that's Toll Cut, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's the Toll Cut, which is the same abrasive, but there's a different backing. The Toll Cut has a PSA backing, whereas these papers have a nap for hook and loop.
Okay.
So, okay. And I haven't been using them with the hook and loop. I've just been putting them around a DuraBlock and doing it by hand. I have not tried this with any kind of power sanding. So, but the nice thing about these papers and the reason you can use them dry is they cut very fast. They don't really seem to load up. They will load up. You will get a corn, but I'll show you how I deal with that in a minute.
How do these compare to like micro mesh or some of those?
I haven't done a direct comparison, but in terms of dealing with lacquer, these are pretty amazing in terms of their ability to cut and not load up.
Cool.
So
Yeah, micro mesh I always found to be too expensive to use, really, because of how it loads. But
yeah.
We talking about the Eagle abrasives now?
I'm pretty sure that Kovacs Super
Yeah.
Assilex.
Eagle. Yeah, Eagle.
So
the only thing about them that's screwy is they don't use a P or a cami grading system. They use their own system, which I think is called a K. But in my opinion, it's the same as P, so don't get confused.
okay.
K and P.
All right.
Yep.
So when I've tried this system, I went again right from the spray gun, and I started out with 1200. I think you could start out with 1500, but I'll just show you from the 12. And the first step was just to get rid of any orange peel, and you can see the white powder. This is finish that's coming off. So it works pretty quickly, and because we're not doing a wet sand, that it's easier to follow your progress. I would recommend frequent wiping, because not only will you be sanding more efficiently because you're not sanding on top of the sanding swarf, but you're also there's less chance of putting any unwanted scratches in the guitar. And then I will constantly be taking this and wiping it, on a towel, and you can see it cleaned it off. So now I already did this side with 1200, so I won't show you any more of that, but I'm just going to go right to the the 15, and I can go at a very slight angle, and then the next grit, I'll go at a very slight angle the other way. And because I'm making small jumps in my grits, I really want to make sure that I'm getting the previous grit out. And I would encourage you to use for each grit, use a different paper towel so you don't have any cross contamination between the grits. And because I'm making small jumps between grits, I don't have to spend a lot of time between each grit, or on each grit, I should say. Okay. So that was the 1500. Now I'm on to the 2000. And in some ways, if you could get this method to work for you, just the fact that it's a dry paper, there's actually there's no power sanding involved, and these papers cut so quick. There's a lot of nice things about this, this method. You could save yourself from having to buy a big compressor and the wet rub out.
I think in order to run those Dynabraids, like the compressor involved, just so you know, in comparison to the sandpaper, is probably at least $1,000 proposition and probably requires 220, I would think. So
Yeah, I just got a new compressor. My first one was about 22 or 23 years old, and it was just done. And yeah, it cost me about $1,400.
yeah, anything where you don't have to be in earmuffs all day.
Yeah.
Are you batching these, Michael? Like when you're doing this, do you like stack up 5 guitars and just kind of do each process over each guitar, or you bring in a guitar from orange peel to high gloss one at a time?
I typically do it one at a time. And pretty moderate pressure, or I should say light pressure. I'm not thinking about trying to level anything at this point. I'm just refining a surface. So as long as I see dust, that's as much pressure as you need. You know that you're abrading the surface. Okay, I'll do one more check. All right, that looks good with the 2000. We'll go with the 2500. It's this nice blue color. And something I noticed from the last guitar that I did this with is that, and I think, pardon me, this happens with all sandpapers, is that right now this is 2500 grit. If I sand on this, say for 5 minutes, it's not 2500 grit anymore. It's typically something finer. The sandpaper tends to break down and break off into finer particles. Some sandpapers are formulated to break off and be the same. I'm trying to remember the name of them. 3M had a product. It was something Tron, I think, and it was good for the harder UV or urethane finishes. Get a new towel. But what I noticed with this last time was I probably did a little too much sanding, or more than necessary, with 2500. And then when I started with the 3000, the final 2500 was actually finer than the 3000. So, you kind of want to keep that in mind in terms of your sandpaper use and how long you're using each piece.
What's a rough time for you start to finish on a guitar body?
On a body, I'd say probably hour and 45 minutes. The first grit, the 1200, in terms of leveling all the orange peel, is definitely the longest. You have, especially on the sides, it's a lot more handwork. And yeah, so it's probably my time frame.
When you're ready to inspect before assembly, are you using the same light that you're using here, or do you take it into something a little harsher?
I can sort of show you the lights that I have in my shop now are these LEDs.
Mm-hmm.
They're really bright, and they make the guitar look as bad as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't take it into any other light, but it is a good point, Ian, that you do want to look at the guitars in different lighting, because what may look really good under a fluorescent, if you take it outside and look at it in the sun, it's going to be a totally different story. And it seems like most guitar shows, they have the most unflattering lights on the guitars all the time. So
that's fun.
now on these finer grits, the 2000 and up, you can afford to spend a little more time. You're taking off so little. You're just refining a surface. You're not going to sand through the finish at this point. All right, so now what I have noticed is this is the 3000, and it's the buflex. It's not the Assilex anymore. I don't know why they switch names, but they do. And I found that these two are too repetitive. So I don't go from this 3000 to this 3000. I can go from this right to 5000. So using the Trizac becomes a little different. And as we discussed earlier, Ian, this is all kind of predicated on trying to spend as little time on the buffer as possible, or even not having to spend any time on it. There are definitely other ways of doing this that are completely valid, and you will get great results.
Yeah, it does. I like the older I get, the less inclined I am to buff, and I think at least in my experience, the nitro that I've been shooting lately, at least in repair, like it just doesn't handle any heat load at all. Like
Yeah. Mhm.
like it just like it's just a recipe for post cure. And I feel like, you know, I actually quite like my Manzurna compounds just because I can go to any, you know, especially in repair, like you just don't need showroom quality high gloss almost ever, you know. So
Right.
I can get there hand rubbing, and as long as I am conscious to take it easy with my my you know, aggressiveness and rubbing, then it doesn't wind up getting warm.
Hey, Michael, how often are you buffing? Is that just something you just pretty much do not do? I couldn't tell if you were saying, is that something you used to do and you don't, or do just sometimes, or
Oh,
on the
I'll
whim?
still, I'll still take this guitar to the buffer, and on my finest wheel with my finest compound, I'll make a couple passes with it, just
What
because I start
what
to get obsessive about it.
are you using? Are you using stick compound or?
Yeah, and if we have time, I'll definitely show you that setup. So, um, okay, so now I'm going to switch back to the Trizac, and sticking with this theme, we can just use this dry. I think I would get a slightly different result if it was wet, but we'll see. Maybe this dry is just using it dry is will be good enough. We'll end up at the same spot. And now I'm just going straight in line. And even though I have this medium density pad, again, this is this is a fairly spongy material. It's fairly soft on the lacquer. And there are some guitar builders, and I think they have a valid point, is that you know it doesn't have to be high gloss. It can be something less than high gloss. It could be like a soft gloss. And so not everybody rubs out to try and produce some mirror type finish.
Michael, on your tops, but I guess on your backs, but specifically on your tops and rosettes, you're spraying or have a finished thickness of 2 to 3 mil. How are you getting away with that? Because even if I'm spraying 5 to 6 or 7 thou, I get checking around the purfling lines. It seems to be a problem that I think I've associated with too much heat. But even if I have a thin finish and I'm doing what you're doing, which is just a hand polish, I still sometimes get a crack along a purfling line around the rosette or something.
I'm not really sure why that would be happening. I haven't had that problem. I feel like in some of the literature on these finishes that if you get above a certain film thickness, then they're prone to checking. So I don't know if that would be the case.
What
The other thing is that maybe there's some wood movement underneath the finish. Uh, I'm not sure. I don't know why. I can't really think of a good reason why it would be doing that.
are you
But
guys?
I just want to say one more thing,
Yep.
and that's I might have been a little misleading in that, remember earlier I was talking about how I said there are some areas that I spray heavier, like the edges. Um, and then certainly like the rosette, I'll put a couple, definitely build up a little bit more film thickness. Things around the cutaway, I like to spray this area right here a little heavier. And but often I'm spraying heavier because I'm just trying to do a little bit of pore fill with the finish to get things, truly flat. So what were you gonna say, Ian?
I was just gonna ask if you were using a similar finish schedule. I think so you were saying you're using urethane sealer. Is that correct?
I am, yeah.
What are you using? What are you using, Bo?
Same. Yeah, Michael and I use the same stuff.
You say use the same stuff and you're getting different results. This is interesting. We got a real control
There's
situation here.
There's two things different, or one thing different to Michael and I. He's got a spray booth that's indoors, and I spray out my garage door in winter and summer and hail or hellfire. So it could be that.
Yeah. What about purfling materials? Are you plastic or wood, or you guys have similar purfling scenarios?
I like black and white fiber
Fiber?
paper.
Are you using fiber or wood, Michael?
Mostly wood.
How far apart are you guys?
Not far enough.
Oh no.
No, we're about 4.5 hours.
Yeah. And how many feet, just for fun?
Uh,
In
I mean-
altitude. You're in Colorado. I was just curious.
I'm at.
Yeah,
We might be similar. I'm at 5,000 feet. What are you?
yeah, about 4,500 feet. I'm just Googling how many kilometers we are apart, just so you know.
So one thing I've noticed with this 5,000 dry is that I'm actually watching, the gloss come up as I do it a little bit more. So, but I'm going to stop soon. I think I'm not going to get any more than I am.
At some point you maybe start burnishing it a little bit, or
Yeah, could be. So I think just for an experiment, this area right over here, I'll do the 5,000, but I'll do it wet and see if I get any difference in the surface.
I think I'll be it for that. It's probably short-sighted. Michael, just so you know, I muted you until the orbital wasn't getting canceled. Sorry about that. Oh, if you're talking, you gotta unmute. I'm sorry.
So the area that I just sanded wet with the 5,000 looks slightly rougher than the hand. Maybe if I had kept going for a while longer. But yeah, there might be a little bit of a burnishing effect on the finish in the areas that I did with the hand for longer periods of time. So, so let me do a little hand rub compound and then we'll see where we're at with this. When somebody asked me about the buffing earlier, so yeah, probably the bigger reason that I still use the buffer is that I find on the sides of a guitar and on the neck of a guitar, the buffer is really nice for all those curved surfaces.
Michael, do you worry about your shoulder at all?
I don't. I don't have any problems yet, but maybe it's coming. I don't know. I'm not doing this all day, every day, so.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to switch to the Novus.
Michael, is that Novus finer than the 3 of the Perfecta? Well,
I don't know. This is the number 2 Perfected. But I find that this Novus number 2 is a step finer than that number 2. And it's not quite as greasy.
Is Jeff Jarrett still there?
Yep, I'm here.
Hey, I bought some McGuire's the other day, and it seems like McGuire's has gone through some changes. Do you know anything about that? Their number 7 seemed to be quite a bit better than I remember.
Here the third compound. I use McGuire's number 7. It's called like a hand finishing glaze.
Yeah.
Let me go get the bottle.
By the way, I was just down at Harbor Freight the other day for reasons that I'll keep to myself, but they got the whole kit and caboodle from McGuire's at Harbor Freight now, like the entire assortment.
All right, so I've got a little strip down here in the middle, which got a little screwed up because I was, as I was sanding this side, I kind of went over the line a little bit. So there's a little dull spot in the middle. So really I'm looking more on the edges here. And the first thing I'd tell you that between where I machine sanded with the 5000 versus hand rubbing, here I can still see some very faint orbital marks. So I need to do some more work here. Here I can see some faint marks, but they're all in line. But I can't see a difference in the gloss. And then I'd say between the two methods, right now, this looks like a more highly refined polished surface than this. Although I would say that this is definitely, this would be fine. It's a high gloss finish. And I think it looks, without getting too OCD about it, this is, it's not just acceptable, but it's good. It's fine. I got no problem with it. But this just seems to be one step a little bit shinier. Now,
Did you flip the instrument just for, so which side is which?
oh, so this is the one we did first with the wet
Yes.
rub out.
Yeah.
And this was the all dry
Okay.
Assilex and buflex.
So you're liking the wet still?
Yeah. Sorry, I know I'm not getting good reflections here. It's kind of hard to show, but you can see the type of mirror, I'm getting off of the back.
If you
We
can, if you want to take pictures of this, we can, and try to get a good capture of it. We can add it to the description of the video too, just so people know.
Okay. So there's one other kind of aspect that I wanted to point out.
Oh boy, please.
Let me see if I can get this here. All right. I'm gonna put something to secure the guitar here.
we all stopped breathing, Michael, then.
Yeah.
So we can all let that go.
There you go. That's
All right,
just
we'll
as
do
good.
that. Okay. So this is something I noticed the other day when I was doing this, is that when I'm close up to the guitar, you know, say within a couple feet, like the back looks totally flat. Um, it's glossy. It looks really nice. It's very reflective. But if I were to take this guitar and put it, say, like 15 feet away and hang it on a wall and look at it, um, my perception was that if I didn't do the hard block 1500, so in other words, that was using this paper with no nap and a hard block, that this finish had like a slightly, almost like a tortoise shell type surface where it's shiny, but there's different little almost facets in it.
Yeah.
Whereas this side, I felt like it was more uniformly flat. But I only saw it at a distance, and I'm not seeing anything like that now. But if I were to put this at the end of a hallway and look at it, you know, I wonder if I would see that again. So that's why I was kind of leaning towards at least having this step in the dry finishing method.
Yeah.
Um, you know, do the one grit with wet, hard block, no nap. So, and
I
man, I love taking naps. Let me tell you.
yeah. The I wonder also, like, uh have you thought about strapping on some of the dry stuff onto the orbital and just throwing an orbital phase into it as well, or
I haven't tried that yet. My only concern would be
loading it?
loading it, especially since it's a dry
Yeah.
and you know building up heat. Um, so, but in general, I feel like the finest, you know, the best optically sort of refined surface I've produced is essentially with the first method I showed you.
Hmm.
No heat anywhere, you know, no buffing, but it's a lot of elbow grease.
Yeah.
So, you know, where somebody might be on a repair or on their own guitars, I guess you just have to pick how quickly you need to get paid to stay in
Hmm.
business, and how much time you want to spend making mirrors out of guitars.
Yeah.
So the
Well,
only other thing that you know I would show you would be a couple little different caveats. For example, on the headstock of the neck, I would go right to hard block 1500. I would just skip the 1200. It's such a small area that really don't need to hit it with the 1200. And then this area, this shaft of the neck, I would use a softer call to give me some curvature. Um, and I think that the dry sandpaper method would work really well um, for a neck, except for the faces of the headstock. So, and um, so I could either take some questions or I could show you my buffing setup. Um, but prepare to be underwhelmed.
let's take a look at the buffing setup, and then we got two hours, so I'd say everybody's gotten their money's worth so far. Wouldn't you say,
Okay.
Evan? Evan gave that a thumbs up.
All
We
right.
could probably also do a few questions too.
Oh yeah, I'm in no hurry. So
Um,
let's see. I'm gonna try and go out here with my phone. Can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah.
Yep. I see the bags.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yep.
All right. Wait, let me just turn the volume down.
All right. So this is a buffer that I basically just cobbled together from parts. And I bought an old sander from another woodworking place, and they had this 1.5 inch bar and some pillow blocks. And basically I bought all the pulleys and a motor and
Ian,
just kind of
can you switch that
rigged
to
it
the
up
full
from there.
screen?
Yes, 1 second. And can you go into landscape mode again? Whoops, hold on a second.
Oh, sure.
I messed that up.
Does that work?
Yep.
Okay. Sorry about that. Do I need to repeat anything?
Repeat from "This is how I polish a guitar." No, I'm just kidding.
Okay.
But,
All right.
It's fine. It's just hard to see.
Okay. So yeah, this is a 20-inch wheel. This is an 18-inch wheel, and I've played with the pulleys on the back of the motor down there to get the speed right, and I've experimented with that over the years. And I use these the Glands Max compounds, and I have the number 15 and the number 30, and those are the two that I use. They're pretty fine, again, because I'm typically going to the buffer and I'm already at 5,000. So, and
is that
and the
other
big-
wheel clean, or is that just a white compound on the far wheel?
it's this 15 compound.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and that's basically the setup. So,
Would you go to like a spray polish after buffing, or do you go back to like the Novus? And
I go back to the Novus.
Okay. Any idea what your RPM on the wheel is?
I think it's probably around 950.
Okay.
I did measure it once, but that was a while ago.
Oh, okay.
So,
Cool.
yep.
All right. Maybe we should ask some questions. Trevor Healy looked up. He looks like he's got some questions.
Okay. I'm gonna get back on the.
That was amazing, I would say. Very, very thorough and awesome. I know that's not a question.
Oh, hey, Ian, can you put me
Yep.
back on the other?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah, if there's any questions or comments.
It's always hard to tell if we explain things so well, or if everybody's just they're socially awkward. We get a lot of questions.
I guess one question on my end would be about the oil versus oilless palm sanders. I just don't know much about that. And is that so that you can keep your line clean from your compressor and you're not, you can use it for both spraying and for running pneumatic tools? Is that what that's all about?
No, it's the oilless tools. This is way out of my expertise, but they just don't require any lubrication, so it doesn't matter the air that you put into them. You just never need to add any oil to the tool itself, like you do with, say, most of the dyno or some of the Dynabrades.
Can I interject something here, guys?
Yeah.
About well, it's very difficult to find pneumatic sanders that are labeled oilless. The supplier that I use is about the only one that I've ever seen that does it. However, I use a Dynabrade big 6-inch one for my initial flattening, and I just lubricate it with baby oil or mineral oil, which isn't going to harm finishes in the future. The issue is that the oil that's typically used to lubricate pneumatic tools is going to cause havoc with some finishes. So you can use an oil type of tool, but just lubricate it with like light or white mineral oil, and that's fine.
You probably, if you're using an orbital for sanding your bare wood too, like you probably wouldn't want oil coming off your orbital and getting it on your bare
definitely
wood.
not. Question for us noobs here on sanders. Also, what would be the advantage over pneumatic versus just a regular electric one? Just
There's a couple advantages. One is that I feel like there's less vibration in the pneumatic sanders. There's more power. They're more powerful. They certainly weigh a lot less, so I think they're easier on your hands.
okay.
And then if you take care of them, they should last a very long time. So, and then the other thing is that you can use them you can use them for wet rub out.
Did you use one during is this the same one you used during your pore fill video? Did you showcase a sander a little bit on that?
I don't think I did.
Okay, fantastic.
Eb, the other thing about the electric orbitals too is like at Breedlove we experimented with some kind of off-brand just pneumatic ones, and it seems like there's something to the pattern of the orbit. Jeff and Michael both said 330 seconds, but like even within that, like they're called random orbit, and there's like something in there that's a little bit, there's a pattern that makes it so that it's nice when it's done, and you don't have pigtails as much. I think time has marched on since I used electric sanders, but the electric random orbitals, boy, their pattern was not great, and it just seemed like they just weren't up to. I mean, they were probably fine for grandpa's making birdhouses, but they just were not up for getting a gloss finish up. So somebody was wondering about too, Ryan was wondering about he said, does anyone use Dux wax for lubricant instead of water in the sanding stages? And I know some people will use, I don't know about Dux wax, it seems kind of expensive, but some people like naphtha for their rub out for their wet sanding. I bet the Dux wax would be great. So
I've done mineral spirits at times, and but that was on poly, so I don't know what it would. Yeah,
would not recommend naphtha. If you're going to do that, mineral spirits would be better, just because it's a little bit more oily.
yeah.
Naphtha is going to evaporate very quickly. Also, it's got a much lower flash point. So if you're using an electric device or anything with it, you're going to, we'll sing and dance at your funeral.
Jeff, you ever mess around with Wool-lub, like any of that stuff from Mohawk?
Well, when I was in the furniture business, we used a lot of different products. Wool-lub is nothing more than Murphy's oil soap.
Yeah.
Just, it's the same stuff. And what it does is when you use it with steel wool, it kind of lessens the bite of the steel wool and makes it cut a little bit more evenly. So you get that kind of brushed metal type of effect that I was talking about on Steinway. That's the way that Steinway does it on their pianos to get that real even, nice scratch pattern. They take those inline sanders I was talking about. They're the two opposing pads. So like it's a double version of that one that Michael showed you. And they put the white Scotch-Brite on it with that Mohawk Wool-lub, and it's really just a gorgeous finish. I mean, when you see one from afar away.
Well, that's interesting. Wool-lub plus white scratch is that's a good tip.
I really, really like a headstock, particularly if it's ebony or a really dark wood that's just like steel wool. I just think that's the sexiest thing in the world, but customers don't necessarily like it. So I usually go to gloss. But another big benefit of doing that steel wool on the headstock is when customers change string, they won't notice the little scratches from their string changing as much.
Cool. Anybody
What-
else?
What was the your two-part undercoat that you're putting on? Did you mention that product?
No, not specifically. It's a Cardinal. It's their two-part poly sealer. I'll just grab it right now so I can get you the part numbers.
I put a link to an electric sander in the chat. It's one that I
Oh,
use.
yeah.
It's all
That's
right.
pretty good.
Yeah.
Like I said, time marches on, and my oh yeah.
So this is the Isolante hardener,
Oh,
and this is well, I don't know. I could read you out the part number, or I don't know if you can take a screenshot.
I got it.
Okay.
Is Isolante, is that Italian for isolate? What is that? What is that word?
It's Italian for isolating sealer.
Okay.
And then this is the second part that you use with it. And this is like almost like a jelly. And then you would just use a regular polyurethane thinner that Cardinal sells, but it's basically just polyurethane thinner you use to reduce the viscosity. So
Have you ever like let a chip of that dry out to see what its properties are off the guitar?
no, I should do that.
I've used butyl cellulose for years, and when I tried to get some from Cardinal, they sent me their version, which is medium WB co-solvent, and I think I like it a lot better than butyl cellulose.
What for?
For it's a retarder. It's their
Okay.
retarder.
Cool.
It's
I believe that Cardinal
butoxide.
product just referred to is butyl salicylate. Is it called WB co-solvent?
Yeah,
Yeah, that is butyl salicylate from what I gathered from the MSDS sheet.
it says it's butoxyethanol.
It's just a different way of talking about the butyl salicylate actually is not a chemical at all. It's a trademark name of Dow, like
okay.
Kleenex or whatever. But butoxyethanol is the correct chemical name, or ethoxybutanol. Ethoxybutanol. Now you know why they abbreviate all these solvents to like EB or whatever, but they're a mouthful. But the same stuff as butyl salicylate. It's just
Got
the
it.
correct chemical name.
Any of these have funky shelf lives? Like does Cellulose go bad over time or anything? Like, you know?
No.
Okay.
Not really. If it's stored in a metal can, it will discolor over time because it does something, kind of weird with whatever is used to make the cans, but that's about it.
Still safe to fly with it.
Yeah,
Yep.
mine is is like an amber color to it at this point.
Yeah.
The Cardinal gallon cans, I've had several rust, and I just take it right out and put it in glass jars because I've gotten amber lacquer when it sits for too long.
Yep. That's perfectly fine.
It's great for
Michael,
touch-ups.
are you spraying? What's your typical spraying recipe for nitro and thinners? Is it like 20% thinners and?
Oh, it really depends on the time of year, but in the winter I'll add 10 to 20% acetone, and in certain times of the summer, I'll just spray it straight out of the can if it's pretty hot out, and then but most of the time I'm either adding acetone or some thinner, about 10
10 to 15%.
What tip size are you using?
I am using a 1.3 tip, and I spray an Iwata LPH 400 gun. And I don't have a lot of experiences with other guns, so I have a SATA or a SATA touch-up gun, but I don't have a lot of experience with other guns, so I don't know how this one compares.
In your sealer, do you say you rub that in by hand on the top, and I think the rest of the guitar, are you thinning that at all? Or is it just the two parts, hardener and resin, and then that's it, the rubbing?
No, I'm thinning it out 50% with the reducer, polyurethane reducer.
Okay. Yeah, I mix up, say, 100 mil of the resin hardener. I have to add like 100 mil thinner to spray that stuff.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Ooh. I got a question for Jeff. Can I ask Jeff a question?
Sure.
Jeff, what's the difference between thinner and reducer?
Well, in the larger scheme of things, probably nothing.
Okay, good.
Although typically, a reducer doesn't have to necessarily be a true complete solvent for the resin, whereas a thinner kind of, well, I'm going to backtrack on there. I would say in the scheme of things that there is no difference really.
Okay.
We're talking about coating nomenclature. Maybe in automotive, and when you start getting into certain industries, there may be a little bit different.
Cool.
Hey, back to the sanders real quick. Is anybody using rotary sanders at all, or just very fine orbital for the whole processes?
I don't think you would want to use a actual rotary, like, spinning like this all the time in a circle, because you're optically, you're going to get a scratch pattern that's going to be consistent, and it's going to stand out more. That's one of the benefits of a random orbit sandal, is that they're kind of self-canceling your scratch pattern, so you don't really get anything that is consistently the same. So I've never used one. I never would probably have the occasion to use one. Although I don't even know, do they even make rotary sanders that are handheld?
Well, I mean, there's all those buffing solutions that you can chuck up onto an angle grinder, or something like that. Like you see that kind of in automotive stuff, I think.
I tried to use one of those big like angle grinders one time to do a guitar, and it just didn't work at all. It just did not work at all.
Well, I have a little Festool sander, and it can do both.
Yes.
It can do rotary.
Yes, the Rotex version. You can switch
Right.
between the modes. I would use, if you have that, I would use for the initial flattening stage, with the 1200 or whatever, I would use the rotor, or I would use the eccentric mode. And then when you use the polishes, switch to the rotary mode.
Gotcha.
The rotary mode is going to be more efficient and get things done quicker than the eccentric mode. But yeah, I know the sander that you're talking about. That's actually a good all-in-one sander. Although it is, for my use today, it's too heavy for me. But that's fine.
Smallest they make is the 3 millimeter pattern. I don't think they make a smaller one. Maybe they do.
No, I do know some people that have done furniture with that. Now guitars, tend to be a different thing. I don't mean to steal the show from Michael, by the way, but I tend to run at the mouth. The when you get into guitars, because the issue that you have with guitars and customers is that the customer can hold it in a variety of different angles of light and different lighting conditions, so that they can be a lot more critical, or things stand out a little bit more different. As Michael said earlier, different lighting conditions will show different scratch patterns. A piece of furniture, it sits where it sits, and so you can get away with a lot of, not so great rub outs, when we're talking about a piece of furniture. So anyways, that's my 2 cents.
I've got a general question / comment. I get the impression that rubbing out a finish on an electric guitar, the finish might behave differently because of the mass of the wood behind the finish. Like can absorb some heat. It's not going to maybe move as much. Maybe you've sprayed it a little heavier. Does anybody who has experience in both electrics and acoustics, does the finish behave differently?
Yeah.
I think just having a flatter surface without, having a blend over an edge, it's not so much a behavior as just like you have to work so much harder on the sides, like just because they're so much thinner. I mean, by the time you've done a radiused edge, you're working with like a 1-inch span around the majority of the edge. So like I've never found a tool that can do that like an orbital, but I'm intrigued by the 3-inch tool, because I mean, even just doing a quick zip could especially like you're saying, as it gets after you've done a harder level, that could speed things up like crazy for me.
Yeah, I do have a really soft interface pad for that 3-inch sander, and that I think if you use that in that stage, it'd be safe and would conform to the curves pretty nicely.
You can use a interface pad with that qual spray sander, Michael, too. Did you get any of those interface pads when you bought it?
Yeah, that's the interface pad I'm referring to, that I use. I just don't use it all. Like, I don't find a reason to use it with the Trizac, because the Trizac is already a little spongy.
Well, what I wanted to just mention was that's a really crappy interface pad.
Yeah.
We like the ones that come with Eagle Abrasives makes 3-inch discs, which I use a lot, and their interface pads are absolutely excellent, really good stuff. Yeah, they don't break down, and they're much thinner, and they are really good for getting like into the waist and around other curves.
I'd be very interested in one of these sanders, Jeff, if you're gonna supply
Yeah,
them.
I just sent a query into my supplier. We had to stop carrying them because I was able at one time to order like 6 or 5 or something like that, and then the next time I went to order them, he said, "Well, you have to order 25." But what I'll do is, if there's enough interest, I'll just get as many as I have to get and just do a loose group discount for everybody. So
cool.
Try and get them down in price. But I have 3 of them because I use one. I use one for sanding the bare wood that's separate from the one that I use for finishing, just because I don't want that cross contamination. Oh my God! Hi, Doug.
Doug,
What up?
where's Doug?
Hello.
He's muted.
Oh,
Michael, I'd also like the overlap with the electrics is I never start at the edge either. I'm always starting a couple inches in and feather towards the outside edge, like burning through a sunburst or color, because I do color on the top of instruments a lot and natural on the sides and back. So yeah. I do a ton by hand, and I would rather speed that up a little bit.
Sure.
Do you limit yourself to coats on the electrics, Trevor?
Yeah, I try and go as thin as I possibly can. Like Michael was saying, 9, for lacquer, that's a slightly lofty goal if you're going over color, but not for a clear coat. I think that's great. And then I might get up to 12, but I spray thin too, like really thin. And I almost never spray full out lacquer. Like I'm almost always thinning or adding retarder. But again, like a lot of people that I work with are okay if you end up scratching things up or rubbing through an edge after a couple years, or the like relic thing in the electric world is so forgiving these days. Some friends of mine are offering these things that are like Chris Swope in particular. It's called like the knockaround finish. For all intents and purposes, it's a perfectly buffed guitar, but if it happens to bump an edge during assembly or the moment you take it out of the case, you just go, oh well.
That's brilliant marketing.
You
Yeah.
call relic yourself.
Yeah.
DIY relicing.
That's basically all I offer. I don't offer relicking. I'm just like, I can spray it really thin and level, and if it's okay with you, then you do your whole thing to it.
Yeah. By playing it. How about that? By owning it.
Only time we got into trouble was someone sent their guitar out for relicking by MJT, who's like the sort of consumer, eBay seller of relicking, and they'll spray bodies and they look, honestly, if any of you ever saw these, you'd just be like, what the fuck is this? They look awful. But he sent one of my guitars that I sprayed with water-based finish to a relicer, and they destroyed it because none of their stuff worked.
That's funny, actually.
It's and he kind of like tiptoed in the door like, I did this thing, I'm really sorry, is there any way to salvage this? And I was like, no, I wish you'd told me, because I would have just said, sorry dude, you can't do that. But he can still play it. It just happens like, instead of checking, they like drew in lines with a razor, and instead of being able to like spray it with the accelerant to get crazing, they chipped things back and dyed it. So it's like,
looks like a Squire that somebody did at home.
It really does, because it's basically the equivalent of poly. Yeah. Yeah.
Well.
Well, what do you think, fellas? Should we let Michael get back to earning 11?
Yeah. Thanks,
Thank you very much, Michael.
Can everybody, unmute and say
Thanks,
thank
Hey,
you,
thank you,
Michael?
Michael. This is wonderful.
Thanks,
I learned a
Michael.
whole lot.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Michael.
Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Michael.
And
Have a great day.
Luth Long is in full effect. So for those of you that have been containing yourself, not humming half of a Stevie Ray Vaughan lick, continue